My name is Justin LeClue, and I'm here today with
Will Sloan.
And you're listening to the Important Cinema Club. And today, we're doing something that we've never done before, an all mailbag episode.
That's right. Our upcoming David Cronenberg episode is still coming, but we had so many letters to get through, and we thought it might be fun just to have an episode where we give back to society.
And there's a lot of letters in here. I may be reading a letter that I've already read. If someone is writing them down as we do them every episode, that's a little scary. But we're taking it from a different perspective. Maybe we'll have a completely different answer.
Well, as the Daniels have taught us, there are infinite multiverses. And for some of those letters, we may be seeing some different realities, and that's valid.
And if your letter doesn't get read, let me just say, I've read it. If you suggested filmmakers that I've never heard about, I put them in a list. Oftentimes we'll get letters and it'll be filmmakers that me and Will we can't really say anything about them.
Yeah, so that's the thing. We don't want to just do a bunch of letters on this episode where it's us saying, well, we're not familiar with that person, but he's on the list. So just know that you were seen, you were heard, and we have actually got great suggestions of filmmakers that we have done, from the four corners of the earth. So don't stop sending suggestions.
So our first letter is from Andrew, and they ask, "Dear Will and Justin, can I suggest William Reynolds as a topic for an episode?" I like to say, we don't want people we don't know, but do you know who William Reynolds is?
I do not. Who's William Reynolds?
He edited some great movies like The Godfather and The Day the Earth Stood Still. He was also gay. His top 4 or 5 on Letterboxd are pretty foundational, well-known films, maybe with the exception of Sound of Music, which I have affection for but don't love. I had never really considered him until someone I follow on Letterboxd recently mentioned him in a review and brought him to my attention. I love looking at editor credits, same thing with cinematographers, because you never know what they worked on, how did they get involved in these groups of people. If you look at William Reynolds, so he knew Robert Wise. That's why he would have done The Sound of Music, The Day the Earth Stood Still, and Robert Wise being an editor as well. Robert Wise is a guy that you don't really hear people champion him that much,
well,
right?
Robert Wise has a bit of a complicated reputation because
he butchered the Magnificent Ambersons.
Well, yeah, actually, that is kind of how he's gone down in history.
Even though he was just following orders.
Yeah.
Because he also cut Citizen Kane, didn't he?
He cut Citizen Kane, yeah. And I mean, his early films as a director, the noir films like The Setup.
Oh, they're great.
I mean, I love his Val Lewton horror film, The Body Snatcher, and then he becomes sort of symbolic of the guy who becomes the studio journeyman who makes big bloated 60s
The Sound of Music, The Sand Pebbles,
Star Trek the Motion Picture, which I kind of like, but even so.
I mean, I've read back in the day Robert Wise defenders, especially French critics, because he was one of those journeymen. So if you can find that value in the really kind of obscure little films, that's where you want to champion them. But William Reynolds, the editor, man, he started on 52nd Street. It's swingy, it's zinging with the biggest stars of swing lane to entertain you as never before. That's a real we got 42nd Street at home. 52nd Street.
We have answered this letter before.
Oh, really?
Because I know this because this is the only reason why I was thinking of the movie Carpool recently with Tom Arnold, because he ended his career editing the Tom Arnold vehicle Carpool. But I gotta say, there are a lot of movies in the William Reynolds editing filmography that, well, on this podcast, one thing I think I've really learned or gone some way towards learning is the role of the editor in film. We did an episode a little while ago on Dee Dee Allen, who edited Reds and Bonnie and Clyde and many other films, and talked about how she brought a particular style very much influenced by the French New Wave to those films.
I remember Robert Wise later on in his career, it was talked about that he would shoot stuff just covered in angles, do a close-up, do a wide, let's just get the coverage, we're shooting this big mega motion picture, and then we'll put it together later on. He didn't approach it in how he would have early on. You hear a lot of editors, the way they approach filmmaking when they become directors. For example, someone like Edward L. Kahn is that you are hyper-focused and you know exactly what you need to do. And that when you don't do that, like Robert Wise did later on in his career, the editor, William Reynolds in this case, would be shaping the whole movie.
Well, we watched a documentary about Dee Dee Allen that showed a clip from The Breakfast Club that showed just all of the decisions that she made, generating tension in a scene of Molly Ringwald looks at Judd Nelson this way while the other character is talking. And these are decisions that are, often invisible to viewers that have an enormous effect. Like the editor isn't just about like cutting scenes together and cutting scenes out. It's about generating tension within the scene. So with William Reynolds, what I'm most curious about is Ishtar. He edited Ishtar.
Well, he did it back-to-back Ishtar, Pirates, the Roman Polanski movie.
I mean, well, with Ishtar, it's like all of Elaine May's movies are movies where they shot over 1 million feet of film.
Yeah, so he's basically like building that film.
And like, what was that like?
Oh, that's right, because we did talk about, oh no, this is a different Yellowbeard.
The Yellowbeard he did is the one with Graham Chapman.
Chapman, yes. Not to be confused with what is the one that Terry Jones directed?
That's Eric the Viking.
Eric the Viking, okay.
Coming soon on this podcast, The Bad Python. We're going to do a bad Monty Python episode where we talk about those movies and maybe Fierce Creatures.
Wow, he even did the Sand Pebbles. He was with Robert Wise right up until the end because he did Rooftops, the Jason Gedrick. I think it's a breakdancing movie. Their one passion is combat. Combat is dance, a street fight during which the contestants try to push each other out of the arena.
Okay, so this rocks. William Reynolds edited Ishtar and Heaven's Gate.
Oh, those are the
both
two,
of them.
gigantic.
The symbolic flops that have since been reclaimed.
But they're also like ones that were just millions and millions and millions of feet of footage.
And by the way, Heaven's Gate, you remember that scene, the big climactic scene, like the massacre scene at the end of that, incredibly edited.
And that's the one that I don't remember. Oh, Final Cut, the book, where they're talking about like the original ending was like an hour and a half. And they're like, what is this? So an editor really needs to get in there and focus in on what's important, which William Reynolds clearly did.
Do you like Heaven's Gate?
I appreciate Heaven's Gate. Is it one I'm throwing on? Like, let's give Heaven's Gate. I think have you read Final Cut? It's really good.
I've never read Final Cut.
Oh, so
I will
good.
get to that. I love Heaven's Gate.
So our next letter is from Robert, and he goes, "Hey, Justin, Will. Thanks for the recent, this was a while ago when this email was sent, kind words on the podcast about my Andras Rajne zine. I've been in contact with Rajne's family. Remember this? I mentioned it?
Yeah.
He was like a TV director, and this guy made a zine on him. And if it's a filmmaker I don't know and someone has a zine, I was like, yes, please.
Tell me just a little more about the filmmaker.
Andras Rajne was a Hungarian TV director, and he's mostly known for doing like wild science fiction stuff where there's a lot of blue screen work. But this is like blue screen in the 80s and 70s, so it's like very psychedelic and anything goes kind of thing. And you don't hear a lot about his movies because they were TV movies. So like TV movies rung lower, Hungarian TV movies, but these are waiting to be discovered and released by a company like Deaf Crocodile, which would jump right into this. Oh, actually, the email continues. I'm trying to build up enough clout to strong arm someone into a physical media release of his work, but I'm still very far away from that point. Wasn't it funny back in the day where Blu-ray companies were like, I don't know if we can put something out on Blu-ray that's not high definition. And now they're like, well, we don't care.
Yeah,
like,
that's right.
You put a note on it that says, we did it from the best available elements, and the people don't blink. They don't care.
Yeah, what physical media collectors care about is, does it have a slipcover?
That's the most important thing. And not 1 second be cut out of it.
Yeah.
Lately, I've been harboring a minor obsession with the works of high-performance automobile designer and manufacturer James Glickenhaus.
I knew who you were going to say before you finished that sentence.
Especially his 1988 film Shakedown. So I suppose I'll let him serve as my traditional end-of-email podcast subject recommendation. Hope you're both doing well, and I look forward to whatever you decide to cover next. Robert Newsom, in case people want to search out his name to find the zine that he wrote.
So obviously James Glickenhaus, a great filmmaker. He made such films as The Exterminator, The Protector with Jackie Chan.
Me and Peter have interviewed him.
That's right. I went to your screening of Shakedown, which is a great...
or was it us, or was it, I believe, Neon Dream? Maybe
it was
Neon
Dreams.
Yeah.
It might have been Neon Dreams Laser Blast.
Last collaboration, yes.
This is in like 2017, 2018 at the Royal. Played Shakedown, which has Sam Elliott and Peter Weller.
Ah, great movie.
And if you watch only one James Glickenhaus movie, I think make it this one.
I think James Glickenhaus, the thing about his movies is they often weirdly structured, like The Soldier is another James Glickenhaus.
With Klaus Kinski. Now he's a billionaire, I think.
Yes, but I think he was always a kind of like investment guy.
Right.
Like that was like his main role, and that's how he got into, movies, because there's money to be made. But he was also a guy that like, he would give money to like little guys and to be able to make movies. And they were like a famous company, Glickenhaus Shapiro Productions, that like a lot of action, because that's what they liked.
They also produced Frankenhooker.
Glickenhaus loved Frank Henenlotter. Like that's how he was able to get the movies out there during that period.
So I think both of us probably heard of James Glickenhaus for the first time because of The Protector, which was one of a couple of failed failed attempts to bring Jackie Chan to the West. And their idea with that one is, let's turn Jackie Chan into Clint Eastwood.
And the only reason that James Glickenhaus directed that film is that when one of the Jackie Chan films came out that same week, James Glickenhaus's The Exterminator was #1 at the box office. So Jackie was like, get me the guy who beat me at the box office to direct my next film.
And like James Glickenhaus obviously was the wrong director for Jackie Chan.
Yes, absolutely.
And because of The Protector, Jackie Chan went and made Police Story as a sort of like, I'll show you what this movie should have been. Now, for years, I would think, I wonder if James Glickenhaus ever saw Police Story. I wonder if he kept up on Jackie Chan's career. And then I read a recent book called The Untold, In-Depth, Outrageously True Story of Shapiro Glickenhaus.
I have that same book.
And it turns out he followed Jackie Chan very closely, and he is really upset about
that he ripped him off as a protector.
No, about the things that Jackie Chan has said over the years, and he followed him so closely that in that book, which is a book of interviews, great book by the way,
very highly detailed. There's a lot of like documents in that book.
Yeah. So focus on the interviews first.
Yeah.
There's a part where James Glickenhaus is like, and by the way, have you seen this movie Chinese Zodiac? That really shows how silly Jackie can get if left to his own devices. So well into the 2010s, James Glickenhaus is hate watching Chinese Zodiac.
I remember like the thing that was going around that time is that like Glickenhaus said like, I know how to shoot action scenes, you don't. Like the classic like, Caucasian working with a Hong Kong director.
So what I will say in Glickenhaus's defense is on the 88 films Blu-ray release.
Yes, he talks about how like he didn't like the way Hong Kong stuntmen were doing things, that like they would get the stuntmen to do a stunt and they would get injured, and then when finally someone would succeed in doing it, then Jackie would do it.
Yeah, and he would said something like
they broke bones.
He said something like, the stunt team regarded it as a badge of honor if they went to the hospital, and not on my set.
No, he didn't want that.
Fair.
Yeah, fair. Absolutely. And very affable late in his career. Kind of bemused, it felt, that like people were still interested in the films that he directed.
To be clear, I like him and I love his films.
The letter just has a PS here. I know it's unlikely, especially considering recent events in Justin's life, but if you're ever in Georgia, the offer still stands to accompany one or both of you to Michael Weldon's Psychotronic shop in Augusta, which appears to be open after the recent hurricane. The Laurel and Hardy Museum in Oliver's birthplace of Harlem, and or several filming locations of Poor Pretty Eddie here in Athens.
Okay, well, listen, I'm actually just going to take a note of this to add to my things to do list, which is visit the Laurel and Hardy Museum.
Do you think that like Michael Weldon, like when people come in and they want to ask him about movies, he's like, I don't want to talk about this. I'm a music guy now.
Yeah, maybe. Michael J. Weldon, for those who don't know, authored a very important book called The Psychotronic Encyclopedia of Film, had a magazine called Psychotronic, where he was one of the first guys. He used to live in Times Square, and he was one of the first guys to ever really review seriously, grindhouse movies and that sort of thing. And I think he just got kind of burnt out.
Yeah, the same thing with Danny Perry of the Cult Movie Things, where at a certain point, Danny Perry's like, I don't want to do baseball stuff. No more movie stuff.
Yeah.
Like Danny Perry, I know that he's talked about, like he's been interviewed. There was supposed to be like a documentary about his cult movie books. I don't know if it ever came out. But like those two guys are some of like the top guys who at a certain point went, nope, no more. Don't want to do this anymore. I mean, I will say that Weldon did call his shop Psychotronic Shop. So, the vibe still goes from there. But those books are long out of print. Never any interest in putting them out again.
Yeah. I mean, they're of their time, I guess, but very important.
Because I remember being very inspired in the introduction to one of the Psychotronic books. They talk about how he used to do a newsletter that every week you would see all the cult Psychotronic films that are playing on television.
I mean, the important thing about the Psychotronic book and the newsletters were like you had the Medved brothers who did the Golden Turkey Awards, which was like, it canonized the so bad it's good kind of approach. And then you had Michael Weldon, who was sort of like, what if all of this like garbage cinema was actually great? And what if all of it, no matter what it was, Roger Corman or Friday the 13th movies or whatever.
What did you think of Michael Weldon's taste?
Oh, I liked his taste.
Yeah, I think his taste was pretty solid. What I really liked is he did a Psychotronic actor's guide. And that's more interesting to me.
I like that book too.
Because you can just flip through and read it like a normal book and just get biographies of actors that you wouldn't think or create the kind of image. And what's great about books like that too is that they're frozen at the time they were written. So some people who may have faded or don't get talked about too much, like they have a big entry and a big breakdown because at that specific point in time, they were really interesting to Michael Weldon.
Well, those Psychotronic encyclopedia books, they were very important at the time because nobody had ever done a reference book like this with these kinds of movies. And he was very dryly funny throughout the book.
Yeah, he's very funny.
But a lot of the books were just about harvesting or collecting information. And the bits and pieces when he would actually insert an opinion, they stick out like a silver bullet, kind of. Like, I remember he was in 1981 or whatever, he's reviewing an Andy Milligan movie, and he says, just out of nowhere...
Oh, yeah. He hates Andy Milligan, doesn't he?
He says something like, if you're an Andy Milligan fan, there's no hope for you.
Yes.
And that's one of those lines that, if in my head, if I have like 15 iconic
critical things,
sentences in film criticism, it's that.
Hopefully we can take you up on that offer. I would love to visit the Laurel and Hardy Museum.
Yeah, you and me, the modern day Laurel and Hardy, I think would be great.
And also, if anybody sees some Psychotronic magazines in the wild, don't touch them. Me and Will get to them eventually.
That's right.
Those are like our one go-to. Like, he did publish a monthly magazine, and anytime we see those in the wild, we're like, oh, we gotta get it.
If Justin and I are ever at like a zine fair or like some sort of used bookstore or something, we were always racing to the magazine bin, and we were always like,
but we always try to stay
competition,
separate sections, so we're not looking over the same thing, and we meet in the middle. So that's a fair thing.
Yeah.
So our next letter is from Michael, and he asks, "Hey, Justin and Will. You've both frequently spoken about hosting and attending screenings of movies on 35 and 60 millimeter, and I'm wondering what you make of the future of these opportunities. With seemingly nothing but Christopher Nolan movies being released on film for the foreseeable future, are repertory screenings enough to keep the art of film projection alive? Are new projectionists being made, or should we be worried that the skill will disappear as a dwindling number of film projectionists retire, pass away, or decide pushing a button on a DCP is just fine? Do either of you have any experience in projecting film? Is this something you would like to pursue? Best, Michael."
I don't think, the genie is going to be put back in the bottle.
No, you
digital.
can't. No.
And it's amazing that there was a time recently when, teenagers at every mall in America knew how to thread a projector.
A 70 mil. Oh, or I thought you were going to say one like The Hateful Eight, where they'd be forced to.
Well, The Hateful Eight was incredible because that came out in 2015, whatever. 3 years before, every theater had 35 millimeter projectors. And then 3 years later, when that movie came out, reels were getting fucking destroyed from coast to coast.
I don't think it'll ever go away because, the same way that records don't really go away. And it is a skill. There will be an interest in it. And I think for probably another 100 years, film prints will continue to kind of just exist in, whatever form that there is. Now, will it be as widespread? No. Would I like someone to start making a new 16 millimeter projector? Yeah, I would love that. And it's probably incredibly complicated, but I feel that would be an interesting entryway because I've tried to get 60 millimeter projector. I've got some, but it's so kind of nebulous. Will's gone through 2 or 3 Super 8 projectors and they never work.
I know. I need a guru to help me with this.
We just need someone to give them to us and be like, this one works. Here you go.
Here's how you use it.
Yeah. Well, I've used 16 millimeter. It's not easy. It was made for bored kids and teachers in classrooms. They're pretty easy to use.
But I think, film projection will continue and in some small cases continue to really thrive, mostly in big city areas.
Yeah, there's a novelty there.
Yeah.
They always get more pull because you can't see it anywhere else in that form.
There's an aura of authenticity to showing a film print from the time that it came out.
Like a local theater, the review is showing La Ventura in 16 millimeter. And it's oh, okay, I want to see that.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
You've never seen La Ventura look like that.
But if you heard someone say hey, you can see La Ventura in a new 4K restoration, I'd be like,
or I'll just stay home.
Yeah, I'll stay home.
But also because it's expensive and it will continue to be expensive to have the projectors, to ship in the prints, to have people who can man the projectors. So it will probably only be a New York, LA, to some extent Toronto.
Yeah, Chicago, any big city, basically. Yeah. Or I know Vancouver at the Rio, they do print stuff a lot too, and they get huge crowds. It's basically big cities have one place that do it. That's what it comes down to at the end of the day. 35 is the hardest though, because there's a lot of prints of that, but it's 5 reels is so heavy. It's so expensive to ship. 16 millimeters for a feature film, it's 2 reels. Very easy to ship.
This is a bit of a non sequitur maybe, but just this last week I got a TV VCR on Facebook Marketplace.
Now, did you go look for it or did it pop up and it was a siren's call for you to go get it?
I have been looking for one for 6 months.
Oh.
And they're always, whenever they show up, they are snatched really quickly and or they're too expensive.
Yes.
If you go on eBay now.
Really? You can't go to a Salvation Army or another thrift store. They don't have them.
People want TV VCRs.
Wow.
And if you go on eBay, you can get them for no less than $300 plus 150 shipping or something.
That's
insane.
wild.
And so
VCRs are not rare. You can find tons of VCRs.
So just on Facebook Marketplace, a guy in nearby Oakville was selling it for $100.
Now, what was the attraction to the TV VCR specifically to you?
Well, the key attraction was I can't get my VCR to work on my 4K TV,
Oh.
even with the adapter.
So that's basically like a technical issue.
Yeah.
It's not an aesthetic one that you're like, I just want the memories of being a kid and having a TV. You're just like, I can't get it to work.
I fucking can't get it to work. So like
Okay.
I need something that can play it.
Yes.
And so I was just this week having some fun watching some videotapes on my TV VCR combo. It's funny, like the further you get away from certain technology being the norm,
the more like warm it feels when you get back to it.
And it does look different. It's
Yes.
an alternative aesthetic. It's a different way to watch a movie. And I think, as I get older and more jaded, I kind of appreciate the many different sorts of ways a movie can be shown, even if it's like, well, I wouldn't watch 2001: A Space Odyssey and pan and scan, but like, could you imagine? Like, it's another version
of the movie that you've probably seen a million times. 70 millimeter. Like, you always see those like viral tweets of someone being like, "Oh, I watched Tenet on a Game Boy Advanced," or like on a toilet screen or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's as a joke, but like, I wonder if you didn't like grow up with the aesthetic of analog, like VCR specific media. Is there an attraction there?
There might be.
Yeah.
There might be.
Especially if you like that thing.
I think also just because of, again, the aura of authenticity.
Yeah.
There are lots of people younger than us who are into like shot on video horror movies, straight to video stuff from the 80s. And I feel like they might kind of, and because they weren't around for it, like we weren't around for nitrate film projection.
No.
So,
Yeah. But the other thing about, those CRT TVs, and the reason they're so hard to get is that like, people who play video games want them because the video games do not look correct. They were molded to be shown on those TVs with the artifacts, and like the issues with it were to smooth out polygons, to make it the colors look right. That's why you could never get one.
No, it's true. If you play Mario Kart 64 on a modern TV, which I have done,
yes,
it hurts your eyes. And I gotta say, those VHS tapes are also meant to be shown on a CRT TV.
You're like, finally, I can watch the most racist Looney Tunes cartoons. All right, so our next letter is from Josias, I think. Sorry if I said that name wrong. Josias? Hello, Will and Justin. I wanted to send an email about a strange movie I came across, and I want to know if you've ever seen it. It's called The Man Who Saw Tomorrow from 1981. Straight to VHS documentary about the prediction of Nostradamus, narrated and presented by Orson Welles. Have you seen this, Will?
I've never seen it. I mean, I've always...
You know of it? You see it pop
I'm
up?
aware of it, yes.
He's in full late era Orson mode, and all the scenes with him are glorious. The movie basically talks about Nostradamus's quatrains, stanzas that he wrote that were said to be predictions of the future, tries to tie several world events to different quatrains written by Nostradamus as proof that he predicted all of it. Events that include Napoleon's rise and fall, Nazi Germany, the assassination of Lincoln. The really interesting part is when it attempts to predict events in the future, and I won't spoil all of it, but it involves a third Antichrist after Napoleon and Hitler.
Yeah, his name is Barack Obama.
Rising out of Iran and the devastation that comes after. Yes, it does get alarmingly Islamophobic.
Oh, man.
This is all obviously ridiculous, and even Orson himself stated in later interviews that he didn't believe any of it. Are you sure he said that, or what did I do? Did I do that?
Well, to be clear, we know that Orson Welles worked closely with the brother-in-law of the Shah of Iran, so his politics were adaptable to the assignment.
My question is, can you think of any other documentaries like this one that are as obviously insane as this one and were as huge as this one, but also weren't tied to any sort of government conspiracy, theory, or political ideology? It just really tickles me that this exists. It almost feels kind of innocent compared to the yearly right-wing documentary that plagues theaters. Thanks for all you do. I will say that there's a lot of ancient alien stuff, like documentaries and things that you can find. Not many that I've watched. Have you ever tried to delve into that world?
No, I'm not that interested in that. I mean, the one I was going to suggest, and I think this may not fit in the criteria because it's a conspiracy doc, but have you ever seen Dan Aykroyd Unplugged on UFOs?
No, Unplugged?
That's what it's called. Dan Aykroyd Unplugged on UFOs.
Like they took his mic away, or he's playing a guitar?
He's uncensored.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, he's not holding back. And this was made in the mid-2000s. In fact, somebody I saw on Twitter was able to show, based on where he was sitting, that he filmed it probably on the set of Christmas with the Cranks, like in the off hours. But it's just 2 hours of him And you know Dan Aykroyd's a UFO guy, right?
Well, so someone said, I don't remember who it was, but like it was someone that was probably on SNL, but they mentioned in passing that like, oh, I saw a UFO once, and that person was like, oh yeah, you did? Give me a second. Here. And he handed the phone to the person, and it was like, hey, this is Dan Aykroyd. Did you see? Did you say you saw a UFO? Like, that's how much he cares about that stuff.
That's awesome. I mean, it's just a collection of Dan Aykroyd rambling at the camera, interspersed with like, VCR footage of alleged aliens. And if you're an Aykroyd head like I am,
Are you an Aykroyd head?
I mean, not really, but I like this side of Dan Aykroyd. I got a kick out of it.
Someone recently made a post that Dan Aykroyd has been digitized on every video game platform that exists, mostly because of Ghostbusters.
Checks out, but also Blues Brothers 2000.
Blues Brothers 2000, the N64 game.
Yeah.
Who can forget that
Blues
one?
Brothers 2000, which was famously delayed by 3 years or something. So it came out.
They needed to perfect it to make sure that it was airtight before it came out. So our next letter is from Catherine, and she asked, I've recently been getting more into your podcast, and I'm really enjoying it. I also enjoy watching Harry Dean Stanton movies, which has led me to some films that I love and otherwise never would have heard of. I was wondering if you guys have ever had similar experiences when you work through an actor's filmography and find gems that you wouldn't have otherwise, whether they're not well known or just something you would have never been interested in. I'd also like to suggest you do an episode about the great Harry Dean Stanton. I have no idea if there's enough interesting things to say about the guy, but I'd love to hear it anyways. Keep up the great work.
One who comes to mind, and I've hardly gone through all of his filmography, but somebody who I will actually, seek out a movie because he's in it is Michael Moriarty. I'm always a little curious, like what he might bring to a role. And obviously, like a lot of people, I got into Michael Moriarty through the Larry Cohen films, and that led me to watch something like Report to the Commissioner.
But there's something about Michael Moriarty in that, like, he's always such a live wire on screen, which makes you want to watch them. But it also has that Klaus Kinski, like, he is deranged behind the scenes as well, supposedly.
Yeah.
So that's why you want to see it, because there's the meta thing going on as well with every movie that you see. Like, oh, is Michael Moriarty, is he just making up something here? Like in Cue the Winged Serpent, where he's like sitting at the piano and playing.
Yeah, where he's doing his real music in that scene. And actually, I've been very far from watching his whole filmography, but Eric Roberts is like that for me too.
I mean, Eric Roberts is tough because there's not like, oh, well, I saw something Eric Roberts was in because, he brought me to films I wouldn't have seen otherwise because they're bad. They're terrible.
Well, what I will say is a couple of weeks ago on Michael and Us, we watched one of the bad Tubi movies that he's in. It's called DC Down, and it's like a disaster movie. And obviously, total piece of shit. It's The Asylum put it out. And Eric Roberts also, obviously, like reading his lines at the time, but Eric Roberts is constantly making strange decisions just with his body and his face and his vocal inflections that, I mean, if nothing else, like just watch his scenes. Like he'll always do something to amuse you.
And Harry Dean Stanton, he first appeared in the Alfred Hitchcock film The Wrong Man in 1956.
That's his first movie?
That's his first movie. And then, so he's definitely a kid during this period. And then he's like in Leslie Salander's Tomahawk Trail. Leslie Salander, a man who never made a bad film, the director of Flight to Mars and The Catman of Paris.
I love Harry Dean Stanton's filmography because actually, like, he was a working actor for 30 years, and then he became a star for a few years in the 80s, like Repo Man and Paris, Texas, and he actually hosted SNL in the 80s. Yeah.
Wow.
And that's, I don't know, just a really weird career with lots of highs and lows.
Like, he is absolutely the character actor guy, but people loved working with him. I'm looking here like, Alien. He's in Bertrand Tavernier's only English language film, Death Watch. Francis Ford Coppola's One from the Heart because he was in one of the Godfathers. He's in John Carpenter's Christine. John Milius's Red Dawn.
Do you have the Criterion release of Two Lane Blacktop? I think it is. Or maybe it's the other Monty Hellman one, the shooting.
Yeah.
Because they're in the extras, Monty Hellman would like go to people's houses and interview them. He went to Harry Dean Stanton's house and they chatted for a little bit and he's like, well, do you remember anything about the movie? And he's like, nope. And then it's just over.
That's great. I mean, we all remember watching Joss Whedon's The Avengers, where suddenly Harry Dean Stanton shows up.
I loved that. I was cheering. It's like he lived long enough to be in the Avengers.
And the reason for that was a cinematographer was shooting a documentary about Harry Dean Stanton. And they're like, why don't we just put him in here? It's like, all right. There's a big, long deleted scene, too, of them just like Mark Ruffalo and Harry Dean Stanton talking. So
my favorite Marvel superhero, Harry Dean Stanton as the farmer.
He's back in AI form. Oh, no. So yeah, that is definitely it's such a vast subject though, Harry Dean Stanton. It's tough to like pick. Like he starred in a few movies like Paris, Texas. Maybe that's the one that you would have to.
You do Paris, Texas, and then you do like a later one. Like I think he got a Max Rose of his own towards the end.
I mean, there's just a documentary about many Max Rose. Well, he's a guy who felt like he was doing Max Roses in like the mid 80s. So our next letter is from Sebastian. And this is actually on the topic we kind of touched on a little bit. My question is a bit nerdy or obnoxious, but here it goes. How do you deal with watching movies that are only available in really poor quality? Maybe I've become too snobby, but especially since I got a 4K Blu-ray setup, it's gotten harder for me to accept shitty picture quality. I'm not a rich man by any stretch of the imagination, but 50-plus inch TVs are very affordable these days. Some newer models start at 65 inches, and watching DVD-level picture quality on a 55 screen is not really appealing to me. I hear you talking about popping in a DVD all the time, but to be honest, my collection has kind of gotten useless now. I tried watching Out of Sight the other day, but it just looks like hot garbage on the big screen like that. And there are so many great films that are not even available on Blu-ray streaming, especially low-budget stuff or spaghetti western exploitation films. What do? Do you have smaller TVs or more distance? Do you watch it on your laptop? Am I just a spoiled asshole for wanting everything to look nice?
Well, I don't have a TV that big.
No.
So that helps.
Yeah.
That's great for if you want to watch sports.
Yeah, the big TVs, and you want it like 60 frames per second, and
or like one of the good new video game systems.
I will say it doesn't really bother me that much. Like some things may look really ugly if you watch a DVD or something like that.
I wouldn't watch like a 1998 DVD of something.
No, I mean, here's the thing: like just watch it on a smaller screen. You have laptops, you have maybe a tablet, like put it on there and it won't look as bad. I mean, that's tough. Like, are you plugging your DVD into it?
I think we've talked about this before, though. I used to, like as a teenager, watch pan and scan kung fu movies all the time.
Yes.
And I don't anymore.
No.
Because it just looks bad.
Yeah. I mean, that is like a completely different, like rewriting almost of the movie. Yeah. Do I watch DVDs? Yeah, I'll pop in a DVD here or there. And I mean, especially if you don't have a choice, I'd rather watch the movie in whatever experience I can get it versus, you know.
So like most movies that would look good, you could probably find.
But here's the thing,
right?
Is that like some movies in their 4K remastered form, I don't like how they look. And I'm gonna make maybe a controversial statement about this. A lot of exploitation films, when they're all cleaned up and they look the best, like we screened Bloody Moon recently, and I was like, it looks so clean. It never looked like this ever when it played in theaters. And there was cutaways in the movie to like an older print. And I was like, oh, I like how that looks.
So I agree with you for the most part. Yes. I actually think Jess Franco, I think he reveals something, like seeing all his movies look beautiful now. It sort of reveals the artistry that was there.
Well, I think it's more of the way that we scan films now is you want as much detail as possible, like less contrast, more of a flat image. That's what I kind of rebel against.
Yeah.
The idea of like, well, we can get as much information as you want on screen. It's like, yeah, but that's not how the movies were made.
Yeah.
And sometimes like that, it doesn't bother me. Like I'm not going to be like, well, I'm not going to watch it. But, I do have a preferred way of viewing something.
And obviously there are certain 4K restorations of like James Cameron or David Fincher movies where, have you heard about what Fincher did with Seven?
No.
It's like, not only is it, AI like smoothed out to all hell, but I think he actually there were certain scenes where the camera was jittery where he straightened it.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I do not like that.
No, thank you.
No. So to answer the question, you just got to take what you can. And the other thing is, you probably have so many movies that you could watch something that looks nice. If it bothers you that much, I would say. You just sit, this is what you have, and we are in a time of so much stuff you can watch that you'll never miss anything. And if that's the only way that it exists, I'm not going to wait for a 4K. I mean, I've made my opinion on 4Ks.
There are a lot of movies that, like the negatives, a lot of those Kung Fu movies
they're
from
gone,
the 70s. And so go on YouTube right now and search The Four Sheepish Dummies.
And watch a taped off the screen, cropped right in the middle version of it.
Looks like peering through a dirty peephole at a movie and just have a great time.
Wait, the letter does continue though, but speaking of spaghetti westerns, but also older European films in general, as well as some Asian movies, what do you think of dubbing issues or audio sync issues with these? How do you get over the fact that the lip movements sometimes do not line up with all the dialogue that you can clearly hear was recorded in studio rather than the location where the scene is taking place? I was watching my Fitzcarraldo Blu-ray a few weeks ago, and it's actually shocking how out of sync some of the dialogue is. I'll be watching these masterpieces and I love it, but I also have to actively ignore these super glaring issues. Also, do you know why American films seem to have so much better at that than movies from other regions? They were also dubbed sometimes, but it is never as distracting as with some of these European Asian productions. What I'll say is, as English-speaking audiences, we are spoiled with mouths matching the lips. I say, get rid of that. Like, get rid of those preconceptions.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, like, here's a way to view it. When you're watching a movie and the mouths don't match the lips and it kind of drives you wild, guess what? In real life, you don't cut to different angles either. Like, there's a suspension of disbelief that you're making on one thing, just accept it on the other as well.
It's funny, like, I grew up watching, like Godzilla movies
Yeah.
and stuff, where I don't even, with a dud movie, I don't even notice it, really.
I think the issue is that, like, oh, this is imperfect and seems less of.
Yeah.
And does that make it bad?
Well,
and what I'll say about that is, no, it doesn't make it worse. The reason that American, everything is in sync or they do it is because that is expected of North America. All these other countries, a lot of the times they're receiving imports from North America that are dubbed, and that is how they view a lot of those big pictures. Like, we've talked about, like, Russian films where you hear the dialogue and then it's like, yes, hello. And it's just like one person flatly reading all the stuff. And that's how they took it.
Well, yeah, there are a lot of probably less fortunate countries, right up till today, where it's like they're watching versions where there's just one guy dubbing every single voice. By the way, Fitzcarraldo, funny thing about that movie is that movie was shot in English just because, like, there were lots of people from many different countries working on it. It was a common language. And on the Blu-ray, you can listen to the, synchronized sound, like shot on the set English audio or the dubbed German audio, and I swear I think the German version is better because
That's the one that everybody on the production would have probably focused on the most.
Well, Herzog himself has said that he considers the German version more authentic, and when you watch the English version, I don't know, everybody is speaking like not their mother tongue, so there's just a kind of stiltedness to it that I don't find with the German dubbed version.
Yeah, when I look at, like, dub versions, I often try to go, except for maybe Italian exploitation films, because it's kind of baked into the nature of them when you watch, like, the English dub.
I mean, those are shot without sound.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's not really any original version, even though the director would probably worked on the Italian version. That would have been the version that they would have, like, been more focused on.
Considered the authentic one, yeah.
But yeah, about stuff like not matching the lips, I would just say, try. It's tough to be like, get over it, but, like, try to think about, like, how other, countries, languages, they take it in and how it doesn't bother them because it's something that's been normalized. In the same way that, like, in Hong Kong, they have burnt-in subtitles on everything that they watch. And that's why, like, it doesn't really bother them when there's subtitles or, stuff is in other languages, Cantonese, Mandarin. That's something that, like, I've been seeing this a lot of older people being like, I don't want to read something. Is it something that I guess you need to form as a kid, that kind of, like, you don't think about it, that you just take it all in? It's a term for it where it's kind of like you don't even have to look down because it's part of the whole image and you just absorb it.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, the idea of people being like, oh, I don't want to read when I go to the movies.
Yeah.
I don't want subtitles. That's a sort of, like, classic Philistine, way to approach movies. But I feel like there's probably less of that than ever, just because.
Well, kids, I don't think it bothers them that much.
Yeah, and also, like, how many people watch Squid Game or all these shows on Netflix?
Squid Game season 2 defaults to English when you start it.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, but I think that the younger generation, it's been more normalized of reading subtitles. And the other thing that you just have to consider is, like, reading subtitles. I mean, I'm sure there's, like, people have done research into it, but it's still the same thing of seeing images on screen and absorbing them and putting them in a narrative context. Like, it's I think it's more of a mental block for people of being, I don't want to read, but it's like you're reading the screen as the images play out at 24 frames per second in front of you.
Yeah.
And that's just adding more context, kind of like maybe a hint in, a corner of the screen or something like that. So our next letter, this is an easy one. The final trailer for Mission Impossible Final Reckoning has dropped. I think it's probably the most consistently good movie franchise out there, beside Godzilla, where every film is a masterpiece. I even have to suck up my contempt for J.J. Abrams and admit he made a good flick. Nah. Rewatching Mission Impossible 3, not that good.
Yeah.
Very JJ-ish. Tom Cruise and the series have now been deified in most cinema circles. Despite the competence and sometimes greatness, I find myself not loving any of the movies or even wanting to revisit them. It may just be my personal taste. Wondering on your opinion of the franchise. Durango. I mean, I love the Mission Impossible films.
I like the Mission Impossible films. How do you feel? There's a certain school of thought that's like, many people feel the franchise really clicked into being really good with like number 4,
Yeah.
the Brad Bird one. And then everyone since then has been sort of a variation of 4. But then there's another school of thought that's like, but the first 3, they all had a tourist vision. There was a De Palma one, a Woo one.
Which is bad. I do not like the Woo one. People love it.
A J.J. Abrams version.
Yes.
Obviously a bit of a decline going on.
My, I think, counterpoint to that is, boy, I really love Christopher McQuarrie and what he does. So because I love that guy so much, I like what he does with the movies. I think these are fascinating films. Like, Christopher McQuarrie, in case you're not aware, after every Mission Impossible film comes out, he goes on for a 7-hour interview with the Empire podcast where they break down like how the movies are constructed. You will not be shocked to learn that there are no scripts for these movies. That basically
they build them around action scenes.
And that they are written on the fly as they're shooting them.
Wow.
And Christopher McQuarrie has said, like, I would like to just write it and do it, but due to the machinations of how basically Tom Cruise wants to work, like, I cannot do that. So they have to be done on the fly. And I think that's fascinating. And when you watch them within that context, I mean, I would never want any movie to be done that way. No, what are you doing without a script?
Yeah.
But that is that Hong Kong feel, if you will.
Yeah, I guess. It's funny. I mean, they're pretty complicated stories.
Yes. But that's why, like, they're just built in piece. Like, they edit it, they go back, okay, what are we missing? We got to go. That's why they cost, like, almost $1 billion.
Yeah, Jesus.
And I am interested in that the last one was not as big a success as they wanted.
Yeah.
And what that means for the next one that's coming out. I mean, what that means is that they're like, oh, it's not a sequel. Don't worry about it.
It was going to be Dead Reckoning 2.
Yes.
But no.
But I'll be seeing it, and I would like to know what Christopher McQuarrie will do outside of Mission Impossible once that Tom Cruise lets his shackles off, because he is Tom Cruise's guy. Do you know why? And I've said this before as a truther. Top Gun Maverick is so good because Christopher McQuarrie ghost directed that film.
Right.
That's pretty clear. Like, that director's made films since then. They're bad.
They went down to the basement where they're keeping Shelley Miscavige, and they said, Christopher, come save us.
So I would love McQuarrie to be like, okay, but what about the Scientology stuff? I'm sure he'd be like, they'll kill my family if I don't make these movies. So our next letter is from Andrew, and he asks, hey, Justin and Will, have you ever considered doing an episode on Jim McBride's films? His career seems like the kind of thing that would fit well with your podcast, specifically that he spent the 1960s through the 1980s floating between the margins of experimental filmmaking, exploitation, and Hollywood cinema. I first ran across his name when Jonathan Rosenbaum programmed his sexploitation film Hot Times here in Chicago in 2014. And after looking him up, I discovered that he directed 3 or more films that I'd already seen. Thanks so much, Andrew.
Well, I have to admit that Jim McBride is a bit of a blind spot for me. I've not seen his remake of Breathless.
I've seen it.
And I've not seen David Holtzman's Diary, which are 2 big blind spots for me. I have seen Great Balls of Fire, and I don't think it's all that hot. Although maybe it is. I haven't seen it since I was like 12, so I don't know, maybe it's good.
Jim McBride, though, he was part of that kind of like movie brat group. And I think what's interesting about his career is that, like, he has, like, I've seen people talk about Glenn and Randa, which he made in 1971, but he doesn't have those like huge hits other than maybe Breathless, where like a lot of people kind of like, remember when Vinegar Syndrome, or was it Fun City, they put it out?
Yeah.
And it's like, it's sold out. People like, they love Breathless.
I haven't, and I still haven't watched it. Classic.
I gave it away because I watched it and I was like, oh yeah, I don't like this movie very much. And I gave it to somebody that does love it. I don't know, like, I've never really heard anybody like talk about like Blood Ties or Uncovered, which looks like a erotic thriller from 1994 starring Kate Beckinsale. 1994 starring Kate Beckinsale, but maybe there's stuff to be discovered.
The Big Easy has its fans.
Yeah, definitely. It's part of like that neo-noir boom. Yeah, stuff to go into. I wonder if we could like explain it in a way of why hasn't he had that big a hit?
I think I just need to see David Holtzman's Diary, and then that can kind of give me an in.
David Holtzman's Diary, I have seen because it was part of that 1001 movies you need to see before you die when I was going through it, and very good. So our next letter is from Octavia, and this is a list of filmmakers we don't know, but I want to read about it because it's in response to our question of like, does anybody have any trans filmmakers that they want to suggest? So to jump right to the meat of the letter, now that the sugar has been dispensed because they praised us, etc., etc.
Yes.
I come to the meat of the letter. On the most recent episode, you had a letter asking about trans filmmakers to look out for. I have some specifics in mind. So everybody get out your pen and paper, as all these names will be said. Dylan Mars Greenberg. She's a Trauma alumni whose style has evolved into a delightful and elevated backyard DIY style that seems derived from 1980s schlock filtered through dreams. Her visuals are practical gorgasms, cardboard worlds, and experimental digital delights. Her recent film, Spirit Riser, has been hailed as new high for the filmmaker. You may also be interested in the Guy Madden narrated short, The Triangle Door. Don't be fooled by Letterboxd. Her filmography is fairly extensive, if a bit underground. Her band, Theophobia, isn't anything to sneeze at either. I think you guys would especially vibe with her work. Another filmmaker, Frances Arpaia, Arpaia. She's an experimental filmmaker, largely working in documentary hybrid forms. All of her films are fairly short and delightful. They capture a specific time and place of trans joy and community that, throughout the medium of film, have this tactile sensation reminiscent of home movies. She has a narrative feature coming out soon as well. Most of her work is on Vimeo, and she may be one of the most proficient experimental trans femme filmmakers of our lifetime. Jessica Dunn Ravanelli. She recently had her feature So Pretty added to the Criterion Channel streaming service. Her approach to slow cinema is certainly contemplative in a way that feels accessible. And of course, Theta Hamill's Fault Lines is a delight. And here's a secondary but no lesser list of personal suggestions of trans non-binary filmmakers. Angelo Madsen Minax, Isa, and that's I-S-A, Sheikh, S-C-H-I-E-C-H-E, Louise Weird, Julio Torres, Tourmaline, Liadin Roche, Jules Roskam, Seppi Mashioff, and Texas Star. You know what? I'm just going to post all of these in the description because I think that, like, I've not heard of most of these filmmakers, and I'm assuming probably most of the listeners haven't either, so lots to discover there. And of course, the letter writer lists to the Wikipedia page of transgender film and television directors. Also, be warned, a number of these people are hacks.
Well, those are the names I want to hear.
Yeah. But my true recommendation to your listeners is to find out what local, digital, or hybrid queer or experimental film festivals are happening. Messaging the directors of these fests or the programming committees and asking them which blocks have trans filmmakers in them. Yes, these people may in fact be happy to hear from people if it means selling more tickets.
Oh, well, that's fantastic. Lots to investigate there.
Love and solidarity, Octavia. Thank you very much for the letter, Octavia. There's a lot more to explore there. Our next letter is from Steve, and he goes, "Hello, Justin and Will. I've been listening to your podcast nonstop for a little under a year, and I've loved every minute of it. Not recommended by doctors."
I haven't loved every minute of it.
No. Except maybe a few minutes in the episode where Justin trash talk Wong Kar-wai.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I remember that. I'm the pro Wong Kar-wai.
I am also pro Wong Kar-wai. I think my comments are in the mood for love. Why don't they just have sex already? Which you stole into a Letterboxd review.
He didn't understand. He doesn't.
No, I understood. I was just like,
you just don't feel it in your bones, romantic longing.
And as people said,
because you could get anyone you want
afterwards, they did have sex in one version of the movie.
And it was
cut out. Good. No, because people.
Although you would have liked that.
I would have loved it. I wish I had sex more often in the movie. Anyways, I've recently been getting into the films of Lee So-nam. Considering Golden Ninja Video has put out one of his films, I found myself curious what you guys haven't covered Mr. Lee on the episode yet. Well, I will tell you why, because on the Phantom Kung Fu Blu-ray we put out, there's a 90-minute episode of Lee So-nam in that commentary
track. That's right.
Yeah.
Lee So-nam is a great Taiwanese martial arts film director. Definitely somebody who specialized more in the B movies. Shaolin vs. Llama is one of his most famous films. He also did Exit the Dragon, Enter the Tiger, and the very tasty Bruceploitation film Fist of Fury Part 2. But yeah, both you and I watched quite a bit of Lee So-nam movies in preparation for that commentary for Phantom Kung Fu. And man, I tell you, Lee So-nam, he just gives you a good time. You know, fast-paced.
Oh man, so I was also thinking, I've also talked a lot about Lee So-nam because I did something for another company, and I think I did a video too, or maybe no, the video is on Phantom Kung Fu, but I think I did another commentary that hasn't been announced yet for a different company. So like, I was very Lee So-nam like overloaded, where I was like, I don't want to watch any more Lee So-nam movies. I've seen so many of them.
But hey, maybe if we run out of topics, we can pull old Lee So-nam
off the shelf, dust them off and give it a go.
Hey, speaking of pan and scan Kung Fu movies, actually, when we were doing that, I watched Woman Avenger on Tubi. It's in pan and scan, but don't let that stop you. Woman Avenger, very enjoyable, action-packed Kung Fu movie.
Directed by Lee So-nam. So our next letter is from Evan, and this is going to be a tough one, but it'll be fun to unpack. I'm a huge fan of the transcendental style, as Schrader would classify it. With that being said, I've struggled to find a director from North America who dabbles in this type of filmmaking consistently. I feel like I've seen so many variations of the style, but seemingly all outside of North America. Do you have any recommendations of filmmakers that capture this style from that region? Thank you. Hope I'm not picking your brains too much.
Okay,
Evan.
here's what I'll say about transcendental style. So Paul Schrader wrote that famous book, Transcendental.
Have you read that book?
I've read parts of it.
I've struggled through that book.
And he focused on Bresson, Dreyer, and Ozu.
Yeah.
And he had a whole theory about, filmmakers who are slow and contemplative and use a minimum of sort of camera movements and make you sort of come towards the screen. And in, I think, 2017, like a few months before First Reformed came out, I saw Paul Schrader at the TIFF Lightbox deliver a talk about transcendental film because a new reissue of that book was coming out, and there was a Q&A after. And I swear, the whole Q&A was just the audience asking about one filmmaker after another.
Are they transcendental?
Yeah. Is Terrence Malick transcendental? Is Apichatpong Weerasethakul transcendental? Is Simon Lang transcendental?
Was Paul Schrader like, look, I was young. I wanted to make my name with something like the auteur theory.
Yeah.
That's why I did it.
It was one after another of Paul Schrader being like, I don't really think so. It's more like they're more like a security camera, or this one's more like, too many camera moves.
What transcendental style is the movies that I liked at that particular point in time who created this feeling in me.
That's right.
Hasn't happened since then because I've not been that age or in that period of my life to get that kind of vibe from it.
But I do think there is value in that book because, like, I do think he hits at some real insights about those filmmakers and how they work and how that style works. Mm-hmm. But I wouldn't stress too much about it.
No,
Schrader himself thought that he was doing that with First Reformed, and I mean he wasn't really.
What, transcendental style?
Yeah.
I mean, you're the arbiter. If it's transcendental.
I love First Reformed.
I mean, if he thinks he's doing it and then it's not that I have to say, then no one does it.
Yeah, you want to know something? Maybe he did do it.
Yeah. You know what's transcendental? Godzilla, the original.
Sure.
Yeah, why not? I mean, I've read that book many a times and I've gone, I have no idea what's going on most of the time because that is a very dense book of, I want it more in t-shirt form, if you will.
I love that. Yeah. That graphic that he does.
Yep.
Y'all know what I'm talking about.
But stay tuned for new Transcendental Cinema coming soon to the Important Cinema Club. Our next letter is from Jonah. And they say, I've been a listener for a while now, got into the show via Moturn Films and Golden Ninja Video, and I've been enjoying going through the Patreon backlog. Plus, I'm a big fan of the Bay Street Video podcast and was excited to hear the Uwe Boll saga spill onto the show during Justin's brief paternal leave. Congrats on the way. That was fun. If people did not tune in to the Justin Free episode of Mark Hansen and Will Sloan breaking down Uwe Boll.
Had a great time.
Oh, man, I threatened that we were supposed to do In the Name of the King. We haven't done that yet.
We'll do that soon.
Yeah. My question is inspired by the fact that here and there I've heard you mention one of my other favorite podcasts, Podcast The Ride. While I believe you guys may have brought up some of their more media-focused episodes, like the one they did on The Late Shift and the Kevin Spacey Oddities, I was curious your feelings on themed entertainment, particularly based on movies. If I could challenge you two to blue sky a bit, what would be your ultimate personalized movie theme park ride or movie-themed experience? Would it be an interactive standing set like Popeye Village in Malta? Do you know what that is?
Yeah, of course. Where they shot Robert Altman's Popeye.
And they just never took the set down, so it still exists. Is that somewhere that on your list of things to go?
That's a mecca for sure.
Or would you want to create a stunt show themed to an oddly specific action film like Universal's Waterworld Stunt Show, which is so popular that I believe in Shanghai or somewhere in China, they opened a whole Waterworld world just around that stunt show?
Right. Well, at the risk of interrupting the letter, I would just like to go back. I would like to go back to the Universal Studios Orlando of my childhood. I would like to go to the Earthquake ride again and see Charlton Heston do his video intro. I would like to go to the Alfred Hitchcock ride.
Did you do these when you were a kid?
Yeah, I did. And they don't have those sorts of things anymore. Universal Studios used to have a lot of rides that were about, they'd be like, here's how the special effects are done.
Well, that was what Universal Studios' whole idea was, which is like, we go behind the movie. So every ride had to be structured in a way of like, all right, how does this explain movies in some way or not?
But now they just show, now everything's just CGI. So it's like, okay, Shrek the ride, whatever. I'd like to go to E.T. the ride. Do they still have that?
It is, because they made a deal with Steven Spielberg that he has kind of almost like control. Do you know Steven Spielberg gets something like 15 to 20% of every ticket sale at Universal Studios?
Wow, I guess he negotiated that at the height
very
of his
early on.
power.
Yep. To give him like all the
he's
properties.
like, you can never take down E.T. the ride.
That's one of the things that he said. You can never take They would have taken it down by now. If it
I mean,
wasn't
they
for
took down Jaws the ride.
Is it gone now, or is it
I thought
somewhere?
so.
I know that it was for a while in Los Angeles, implemented in the studio ride.
Okay.
Which is the studio ride is ridiculous because it's like you King Kong shake your thing, but CGI Peter Jackson King Kong, a movie that people have forgotten by this point.
Yeah.
There's a awful Fast and the Furious part at the end of the ride. You get to see the water go down the dam, and it's like that's where they shot Big Fat Liar.
Oh, now that's my mecca.
They do have still the Frankenstein's Village.
Okay.
Is still there. And
Do they have? Where's Norman Bates' house, and can you visit it?
it's still there. I think it's on the ride, and there's like an actor playing Norman Bates who like comes out and yells at you.
Wow.
It may just be a facade at this point, but yeah, I believe it's still there.
Oh man, I used to love the Terminator 2 ride.
I know that's gone. Yeah, T2 in canon.
Speaking of podcast, the ride, when we were on a road trip, we listened to that episode they did about the Tonight Show ride, and I mean that's really
the Jimmy
funny.
Fallon one.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Oh, that's one of the
So
great
good.
episodes. And that's still is that a Universal?
I think so.
I think Orlando.
Well, you know, the thrust of their conversation was sort of about how, like, name a famous Jimmy Fallon bit. You can't.
No, you can't.
But nevertheless, the ride is sort of trying to manufacture these. Oh, we all remember hashtag the panda.
Yes. I mean, okay, so, I mean, you did say movie-related thing, but speaking of that, I would love a Leno versus Conan ride.
Oh, yeah. A Tonight Show ride that's actually about what went down.
Yes. Like a dueling coaster thing where there's screens, or like you go into Jay's mouth.
Or I'd like a David Letterman ride where it's like, you know, you get to be Jerry Lawler and you get to, you know, the seat moves while you punch Andy Kaufman, or you get to be like a frightened staffer who's like, Dave's not coming out of his dressing room.
What are you going to do?
He's clinically depressed.
All right, but those are movie-related things.
Yeah.
We're just two podcasts a ride pilled at this point. What is a movie-related thing that you would want like a ride of?
Okay, well, I'm not gonna think too hard about this.
No.
I'm just gonna go with
Batman.
what first comes to mind. Batman.
Yeah.
I want Tim Burton's Batman specifically. I want to go to the Batcave. I want to go to Axis Chemicals. I want to go to the Penguin's ice lair.
Mm-hmm.
And then also I'm gonna say Enter the Dragon. I want to go to Hans Island. I want to go to Hans Island.
So what is the perspective in this? Are you just someone, so there's many ways that you can make rides now, that like the main one they do is like you are a tour group and it goes wrong as you do it. Are you visiting Hans Island?
I want to be Bruce Lee.
Oh, okay. So Disney used to do the rides that way where like you are Snow White on the ride,
Right.
but people would be like, but where's Snow White? Like, I just want to see Snow White.
Well, I mean, what, am I going to be John Saxon? I mean, that's bullshit.
No, you are.
You are John Saxon, and you get to sit over here for the whole movie while the cool guy does everything.
No, you're visiting the island to see the event. And I guess you're in a train ride.
You're just one of the generic guys in a karate gi, you know, standing
Yeah,
around.
Exactly. And and it's like a slasher film where Bruce Lee's coming after you. It's like a horror maze of some sort. Yeah, let's get it. Let's get a universal horror maze, Enter the Dragon, and you're terrified of Bruce Lee coming at you and trying to kill you.
Yeah.
Because you're just like one of the generic karate guys. Maybe you're Jackie Chan.
Yeah. Oh, and I'll throw in one more. I want Super Mario Brothers 1993, the ride, because I like the idea of doing a huge ride like 30 years later for a failed blockbuster.
You know that like there is a Nintendo Land and there is a Mario Kart ride and it moves really slowly.
I bet.
And that you wear like VR goggles where all the things are like appearing. And as I think someone on Podcast The Ride said, it's like you have something on your windshield that you're like, I can't get it off.
Yeah.
Like, it just does not work. I will say though, I am excited. Universal in Orlando, great place. I mean, Orlando, can't wait to visit again. They're opening
I like the political culture, especially.
a gigantic park of all new things, and like it's all your favorite movies. How to Train Your Dragon Land, but there is a Universal horror monster movie land where you get to go into like Dracula's castle. There's gonna be a dark ride with animatronics of all the Universal monsters.
Did you get to hang out with Tom Cruise mummy?
No, I wish.
Or Nicholas Holt Renfield.
Do you know what the land is called?
The land of the failed franchises.
It's called Dark Universe.
Oh,
I'm not even joking.
I think that's great. I think they got to stick with it.
But it's all new IP. So it's like kind of like not the Lon Chaney werewolf, because I think that would be a little bit weird for people. It's just like a werewolf. But in the Universal Dark Ride, you're going to meet Victoria Frankenstein, everyone's favorite granddaughter of Victor Frankenstein. Not a character. They created her for the ride.
Do you think the Universal people are really pissed off because they've been spending 30 years trying to get something going with their monsters? Are they pissed off at Nosferatu right now?
I don't know. I mean, it's all about Universal, like, wanting to just buckle down and make the movies. I mean, the Wolfman movie is coming out this weekend, but supposedly the Wolfman is just kind of a slightly hairy guy in the film.
Oh, yeah.
It's also about trauma.
Well, it's like The Invisible Man by the same director a couple
Lee
years
Winnell.
ago, where it's a sort of like very loose reimagining of the title, basically.
Yeah. But what we want is just cheap movies that deliver on it, that are not elevated.
That's right.
And at the end, they can be in mediocre films where some of them are in it, just in passing.
And then, we got to have CGI Abbott and Costello come back. Abbott and Costello meet like 2020 Invisible Man.
And Tom Cruise. Like, it ends with like the Tom Cruise movie, Abbott and Costello like walking through the door and they're like, we're forming a team. But yeah, make more monster movies, and I can't wait to go to that Monster Land. Universal is doing something because they were famous as like, they have screens in their ride. So you're basically like on a moving vehicle and you just see screens the entire time. And only recently they're like, people like animatronics. They like that novelty of it, and that they're bringing that back. Like, that's why that monster ride is all. I love animatronics. I am not a thrill ride guy. I'm not like, bring me up in the tower and bring me down. I'm like, I want themed experiences. I want characters that they're trying to sell to you as you're walking out, and they got to be exclusive to that land.
That's right.
That's what really interests me. Well, okay, so I think we've gotten through enough letters, even though we have like 15 left, but we've been running for an hour at this point.
Okay, well, on our Patreon this week, we are going to continue this episode.
More letters.
More letters.
So people are like, are they going to read my letter on Patreon? Maybe. Maybe we'll have to subscribe to find out.
Yeah. We gotcha.
We gotcha. Well, thank you very much for everyone that's been listening and sending your letters. It makes us feel very warm on the inside and allows us to also keep doing this.
And I think it was shameful that Justin, when he was reading your letters, cut out most of the parts where you compliment us. I love that. Keep telling me that I changed your life, please, et cetera, et cetera.
So next week, David Cronenberg we're talking about.
That's right.
Patreon, more letters. So I guess we got it all covered. So until next week, my name's Justin Clue.
I'm Will Sloan.
Thanks for listening.
Well, David Lynch
has passed away.
What more is there to say than that?
Yeah, I mean, look at social media. Everyone is saying how they feel, how important he was in their life.
I must say, I was a little surprised in a good way about how unanimous it was.
I think David Lynch is probably one of the most unanimously loved filmmakers, probably of our generation.
Which is surprising because, like, when I first became aware of him, like, as a child, basically, like, it was kind of like, oh, he's the really weird guy, you know? You would think that somebody who made movies that were like slow and difficult and abrasive, but who nevertheless like had a particular knack for like getting at a kind of collective unconscious. Like, many people, as difficult and abrasive as his movies were, many people found a lot to identify with in those films.
And I do think that David Lynch was a master at weaving that difficult experimental within a mainstream lens that felt very personal to him. But like, you have entryways of things like, you know, even going like The Elephant Man, for example, or the main one, Twin Peaks. Like, you can enter into the David Lynch world through Twin Peaks and then just explore all the weirder angles and the more kind of deep and unknowable angles from there.
Well, a movie like Blue Velvet, which was a gateway for so many people, not just for Lynch, but for like serious cinema in general. It's like, that was a movie that hit it, you know, in its most basic and crude analysis, you could say it's about like the darkness hiding beneath a placid surface. And that's something that everybody can understand and identify with.
Are movies allowed to say this? And that seems trite or me being sarcastic, but like, it does move people when they would see that.
Something I was thinking about, you know, the past couple days is how I feel like I have had a particular relationship with Lynch, and I feel like a lot of people feel this way, where, you know, every time you see one of his movies, if it's been a few years separating viewings, the movies change. Because the movies are open-ended and ambiguous, and they are more terrains than they are didactic or anything like that. They're endlessly suggestive, endlessly elusive, of, and they can mean very different things to you at very different parts of your life.
And Lynch knows this, and I love how delightfully trolly that he is about talking. Like the classic Mulholland Drive, like, here are the hints. And he's like, I just made those up.
I was flipping through his book, Catching the Big Fish again, and there's that great chapter where he's like, I keep saying that Eraserhead is my most spiritual film, and nobody believes me. Well, one day I picked up the King James Bible, and I found a sentence, and I thought, this is what Eraserhead is about, and I'll never tell anyone what the sentence is.
And I think he said stuff like, no one has ever figured out what Eraserhead is about. I mean, it's about being a father. We got
it's about being a father, and it's also about so much more than that.
Yes.
It's like, it's about, and Eraserhead is another example. It's like, if you see that movie, when you're 17 or 18, it might mean something else. If you see that movie like before you've ever had a girlfriend or something like that, it's one thing. And then you see it, if you're a married person, maybe with a father, and it's another thing.
Oh no, I can't watch it. It's too scary for me.
Yeah.
Oh, you are sick. And his movies are very funny too. I think that should not be discounted. And I think that that's like the entryway point into a lot of his work. And yeah, just the way that like it's such a career that is defined by stuff he didn't get to make. Like David Lynch has a like wide body of like scripts that he wrote, things that just didn't get off the ground.
And especially the last 30 years where it's like, Mulholland Drive and The Straight Story, what were they? They were funded by Studio Canal. So he couldn't get funding in his own country.
I mean, The Straight Story is a Disney film. You can watch it on Disney Plus right now.
By Disney. Like, and Netflix famously, I guess, put the kibosh on what he was working on after
during the pandemic.
The Return, which is a shame. But, even though he doesn't have that many feature films in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't feel like a small filmography.
No, I think it is a gigantic kind of like all-encompassing filmography.
Yeah, because it's like each movie has infinite versions of itself, if that makes sense.
You still haven't seen Twin Peaks: The Return, right?
No, I haven't. It's pretty shameful. And the thing is, well, now I'm watching Neon Genesis.
Evangelion, yeah. You're not going to get Twin Peaks: The Return right now.
Well, can we do this on the podcast sometime?
Twin Peaks: The Return?
But, well, it's because like I've seen the first season of Twin Peaks, and I want to do the magisterial rewatch of it.
Oh, man. So you're going to start first, and then the like 20-ish episodes in the second?
Yeah. And everyone tells me, no, just watch the first 8 episodes and then go to the last one. But
you got to get in there.
So I think what actually I just need to do is actually like very soon, and I've been saying this for a long time, but like set up the regimen.
Could you make it like a project with your partner of just like sit down, watch Twin Peaks? Does that interest her?
It doesn't interest her. She's seen most of it.
Because that's a good way to get into it.
I know. If you think I haven't thought of this.
Twin Peaks: The Return, that was, me and my friends were just chatting about this yesterday, like one of
an event.
An event that like we were all sitting down, we were watching it, and then we would just talk about it endlessly after. Like, what does it mean? What did you feel that like, hey, am I missing something right now?
Oh, did I feel that way? Yeah.
You could have just gotten into it.
I know. So, hey, listen, this is my New Year's resolution pledge to you, the listener.
By the end of the year.
By the end of the year, I will have watched all of Twin Peaks.
Okay. I mean,
and I've seen Fire Walk with Me, which is great.
Twin Peaks: The Return is kind of like the best final thing you could ever do. Is that like that feels like he did other stuff like the Netflix thing where he interviews a monkey.
Oh yeah, and to say nothing of like hundreds of short films
and
seemingly.
Music and painting.
Do you have the DVD like the best of DavidLynch.com? No. Yeah.
Do you have that one?
Yeah,
were you into when he was basically doing Patreon before Patreon?
No, I really wasn't
financially stable probably at that time.
Well, I was like a child basically, but I do have the DVD and it's interesting.
I mean, speaking of trollish behavior, those DVDs where he's like, Eraserhead, no chapter stops.
Oh man, kids today, you have no idea how good you had it because there was a time when it was actually almost impossible to watch Eraserhead. You had to get the DVD straight from his website, and talk about access. I mean, when I was a teenager, I went down to Bay Street Video to rent Eraserhead because that was like the only copy in the city, and they ordered it straight from his website. Now you can just watch it on the Criterion channel anytime you want.
I'm kind of fascinated if there's going to be a Prince-like exploitation of his back catalog now, because David Lynch was very particular about how things were released. Because like
he didn't like chapter stops,
and he didn't like a Lost Highway scan. Was it Arrow? Some company
Kino put it out.
And it was going to be a big special edition. And he went, nope, none of that. Get it all off.
People did commentaries. Yep. They did, yeah.
And that Inland Empire thing, where they're like, we print it to 35, and then we rescanned it to get it. And David Lynch is like, I like the AI upscaled version. And they're like, I guess that's what we're putting on the Blu-ray then.
I now have multiple copies of Inland Empire because it's
Of
like
the different, like, you know,
'cause
the
they're
DVD
different
version.
versions.
Yeah, they're completely different
Yeah.
versions. I mean, that's literally what you were talking about the different experience. I mean, Inland Empire feels like a final film.
Oh, yeah.
Like, this is all I have to say. So, like, the fact that Twin Peaks: The Return exists afterwards, where he's revisiting work, commenting on it, I just love that it's out there.